We tend to think of major shifts in how businesses operate as, well, pretty recent developments, right?
Yeah, mostly.
But okay, let's unpack this because digging into our sources reveals a surprisingly long history behind this whole idea of companies having a responsibility beyond just the bottom line.
Oh, really?
Yeah, get this. Way back in the early 1900s, even the 1930s, influential figures were already talking about it.
Wow. Okay.
Thinkers like the German industrialist Walter Rathenau, he believed that as corporations grew in power, they sort of inherently took on a public duty.
A public duty. Interesting.
And philosophers like John Dewey and James H. Tufts were suggesting that companies' purpose shouldn't just be about making money,
Mhm.
but also about contributing to the greater good.
That really does reframe how you think about the origins, doesn't it?
Totally.
It absolutely does. And what's fascinating here is the enduring relevance of that basic question. What exactly is the role of a corporation in society beyond simply generating profit? That's the core of what we're exploring in this deep dive into corporate social responsibility, or CSR.
Right.
We're going to look at its different facets, why it's become such a significant topic, and the diverse ways it shows up in the business world today.
And for this exploration, we've pulled from a really broad range of material. I mean, quite a mix.
Yeah, like what?
We've got insights from a publishing group, a workshop summary from the National Academies Press that looked at global environmental health and CSR.
Okay, that sounds substantial.
Yeah, and we're also looking at articles from the World Bank and nebusinessinfo.co.uk, both focusing on that key area of environmental responsibility.
Ah, the green stuff. Always important.
Definitely. Plus a clear definition from Vitality.io, different perspectives on the types of CSR from Harvard Business School Online,
HBSO, yeah, they usually have good frameworks.
and even a research paper out of Croatia that used survey data to analyze the environmental impact of CSR.
Oh, actual survey data. That's great.
Yeah, it's a genuinely rich mix of, academic thinking and practical business advice.
Precisely. And by bringing together these varied viewpoints, we can really develop let's say, a nuanced understanding of what CSR truly means in today's very interconnected world.
Makes sense.
Our goal with this deep dive is basically to provide you, the listener, with a clear and comprehensive grasp of CSR.
Right, without getting totally bogged down.
Exactly. No getting overwhelmed by jargon or, too much dense information. We're aiming for those key insights, those aha moments that will help you make sense of this increasingly important part of the business landscape.
Okay, so with such a broad topic,
Yeah.
where do we even start? I guess one thing that our sources make really clear is that CSR isn't some static, fixed idea.
That's a crucial point to get right from the start, yeah. As Noreen Kennedy from the U.S. Council on International Business aptly put it, CSR is a moving, evolving target.
A moving target.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, there isn't one single universally agreed upon definition. But it's important to remember, as our sources emphasize, CSR isn't meant to step in and replace the essential role of government.
Right, it's not taking over government functions.
No, not at all. It's
Yeah.
not about addressing sustainable development instead of governments.
Got it. So it's not about companies suddenly becoming governing bodies.
Exactly. But there's this growing understanding, driven by globalization and how connected everything is,
Mm.
that companies have responsibilities that go beyond just following the law.
Okay.
Some believe CSR should be like a mandatory global standard. Others argue, well, many companies are already doing various forms of it anyway.
Right, voluntarily or maybe strategically.
And the sheer scope of CSR is, well, it's remarkable. At a bare minimum, as our sources consistently highlight, it always includes environmental considerations.
Always the environment.
Always. But it also stretches into social, ethical, governance, even health aspects of how a company operates. It's potentially huge and complex for businesses to navigate.
Which I guess naturally leads us to that idea of the triple bottom line, doesn't it?
Yes. Profit, people, planet.
Exactly. It's that recognition that business success can't just be measured by the financial numbers anymore.
Precisely. And Harvard Business School Online provides a really helpful framework here. They break CSR down into 4 key categories:
Okay, what are they?
environmental responsibility, ethical responsibility, philanthropic responsibility, and economic responsibility.
Right, 4 pillars.
Yeah, this breakdown lets us explore the different ways CSR actually works in practice.
Okay, let's dig into those then. Environmental responsibility. I guess that's the most obvious one for many people.
Often, yes. At its core, it's about minimizing a company's negative impact on the natural world. Pretty straightforward concept.
So that means things like reducing pollution, greenhouse gases?
Exactly. Increasing use of renewable energy, using sustainably sourced materials, a whole range of actions.
And nebusinessinfo.co.uk, they offered some really concrete examples, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Very tangible things like actively working to cut down energy and water use.
Practical stuff.
Yeah, implementing better waste management, recycling programs, even encouraging eco-friendly travel for employees.
Makes sense.
And they also point out this isn't just about being, green for the sake of it. It can actually lower business risks.
How so?
Well, less waste can mean lower costs, avoiding environmental fines, for instance. Plus, it enhances a company's public image.
Right. Reputation matters.
Hugely, and
Sure.
it can even lead to cost savings. Plus, more and more, customers actively prefer to support companies committed to environmental sustainability.
Yeah, you see that more and more. And Vitality IO really emphasized this too, highlighting specific actions like investing in renewables, conserving resources like water, using sustainable packaging.
The packaging thing is big now.
Definitely. And even offsetting carbon emissions, like through tree planting initiatives.
Right. They emphasize that embracing this environmental responsibility isn't just sort of ethically nice. It can save money, reduce risks, and give a real competitive edge.
Okay, so that's environmental. What about ethical responsibility?
Right. Moving on to ethical. This focuses on a company operating with fairness and integrity in all its interactions.
With everyone.
Basically, yes. Leadership, investors, employees, suppliers, customers, all the stakeholders.
So we're talking about things like fair wages, good working conditions,
Absolutely.
ethical sourcing,
Right.
making sure supply chains are clean,
Right.
no forced labor, no child labor, that kind of thing Harvard mentioned.
Exactly that. Crucial stuff. Then we have philanthropic responsibility.
Philanthropic, so charity, giving back.
Pretty much. It's about a company actively contributing to making the world, well, a better place.
How do they do that usually?
Often through donating money or resources to charities, supporting nonprofits, maybe even setting up their own company foundation.
Okay. And the last one, economic. Sounds like just making profit again.
But it's nuanced. Economic responsibility here isn't just about maximizing profits in isolation.
Okay.
It's about making financial decisions with a broader commitment, factored-in commitment to the well-being of people, the planet, and society overall.
So integrating it all.
Exactly. It's an integration of financial goals with social and environmental well-being.
Right.
Now, if we connect this to the bigger picture, our sources highlight a growing global expectation
An expectation for
from businesses everywhere to operate in an economically, environmentally, and socially responsible way, even where government rules might be weaker.
So it's like a global standard emerging, even without formal laws everywhere.
Kind of. It's almost as if a sense of global corporate citizenship is developing. Eric Orts from UPenn discussed this.
Global corporate citizenship.
Yeah, with globalization, companies become these massive entities operating across borders. And there's this increasing feeling that they owe something to the wider global community, not just where their headquarters are.
And international organizations are pushing this too.
Oh, definitely. They're playing a big role. The National Academy's Press Workshop summary mentioned the UN's Millennium Development Goals.
Which are now the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs.
Right, the SDGs. The expectation there is that it's not just governments, but all sectors, including businesses, should be actively working towards those goals.
And what about the OECD? I remember seeing that mentioned.
Yes, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Catherine Gordon noted their guidelines for multinational enterprises.
And what do those cover?
They're really comprehensive, recommendations on everything from environmental stewardship to human rights, anti-corruption, a whole package.
So it's guidance, basically.
It's a blend. Voluntary adoption by businesses, but also a commitment from governments to promote these principles.
Okay, this raises a really interesting question, though. What actually makes companies do this stuff? What's the motivation?
Ah, that's key. Our sources suggest a distinction. There's what you might call true CSR.
Driven by ethics.
Exactly. Driven by fundamental ethical principles, a genuine desire to contribute to the public good.
Okay. And the other kind.
And then there's what David Barron calls strategic CSR, or corporate social performance.
Strategic CSR. Sounds like.
It's where actions that look socially responsible are ultimately motivated by profit.
Ah, okay. So it helps the brand, attracts customers or employees.
Precisely. And the extreme problematic end of that is greenwashing.
Right, greenwashing. That's basically just PR, isn't it? Deceptive marketing.
That's exactly what it is. Companies trying to look eco-friendly just for show without making real changes underneath.
Yeah, definitely something for us all to watch out for as consumers.
Absolutely. Now let's circle back to that really crucial area, environmental responsibility. It just keeps coming up.
It does seem central.
It is. And beyond the broad ideas, Nye Business Info and Vitality IO give us some very specific, actionable steps companies can take.
Like what, specifically?
Things like designing products so they can actually be recycled easily, thinking about the whole product life cycle to minimize waste.
Cradle to grave or cradle to cradle?
Kind of, yeah. Sourcing raw materials responsibly using recycled content or sustainable timber, for example.
Makes sense.
Minimizing packaging, that's a big one. Prioritizing local sourcing to cut down on transport emissions.
Reduces the carbon footprint.
Exactly. And actively partnering with suppliers who also have strong environmental commitments. It's about the whole chain.
And the potential upsides, the benefits of doing all this environmental CSR, they seem pretty significant.
They really do. We're talking reduced operational risks, like we mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Fewer fines, maybe lower insurance.
Potentially. Enhanced public image and brand reputation, that's huge.
For sure.
Potential cost savings through better efficiency, less waste, and even maybe tapping into new revenue streams.
Because customers are demanding it more.
Precisely. More and more customers factor this in when they buy things.
Okay, but it can't all be easy. Putting CSR into practice must have its challenge.
Oh, absolutely. It's not always straightforward. Our sources highlight several key hurdles.
Such as this?
Well, sometimes just a general lack of awareness or education on these complex environmental and social issues within the company.
Right, knowing where to even start.
Exactly. Limited financial resources is another big one. Finding the funding to implement sustainable practices isn't always easy, especially for smaller businesses.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then there's the difficulty in actually measuring the progress and the impact of these initiatives. It can be hard to quantify.
How do you track if you're really making a difference?
It's a challenge. Which brings us neatly to that really fascinating research paper from Croatia.
Ah, yes, the survey.
Yeah, they surveyed people to understand their attitudes towards companies that prioritize social responsibility. And the findings offer some really insightful perspectives.
Okay, tell me more.
They really do. What's particularly striking is the direct link they found between CSR and people's preferences and, crucially, their actual behaviors.
So not just what they say they like, but what they do.
Exactly. The survey data showed a significant majority of respondents had a clear preference for working for companies that are socially responsible.
Okay, prefer to work there.
Even to the point where they'd be willing to accept a slightly lower salary
Wow, really?
in exchange for better working conditions, better health and safety, and more opportunities for professional development.
Wow, that's a powerful indicator. It really shows CSR isn't just about external image.
Not at all. It directly impacts attracting and keeping talent.
Huge. What else did the survey find?
Well, it also revealed that people actively do environmentally conscious things at work. Like conserving energy, participating in recycling programs. It suggests a personal alignment with those values carries over into the workplace.
Interesting. So employees want to be part of it.
Seems so. And crucially, they found consumers factor CSR into their purchasing decisions. A large majority said they'd react negatively.
Towards companies seen as irresponsible.
Yes. And they were even willing to pay a bit more for products from companies with strong CSR practices or those supporting environmental causes.
Paying a premium for responsibility.
Right. And conversely, negative stuff like using child labor or ignoring environmental damage that acted as a major turnoff for consumers. A real deterrent.
So it's really not just about doing good. There's a clear, measurable impact on the bottom line tied to how a company is perceived socially and environmentally.
Precisely. The research from Croatia provides pretty compelling empirical evidence for that connection.
Yeah.
It just reinforces this growing understanding that CSR, especially environmental responsibility, is becoming more and more critical in how businesses are judged by their own workforce and their customers.
Okay, so just to quickly recap then, we've seen that the core ideas behind CSR, they have historical roots. Go back further than maybe we thought.
Much further, not just a modern fad.
Right, and it's a constantly evolving concept, no single fixed definition, but it generally revolves around that triple bottom line idea.
People, planet, profit. Considering all three.
Yep, we explored the four main categories: environmental, ethical, philanthropic, and economic responsibility.
looking at practical examples for each, how they actually play out in businesses.
We've also highlighted the increasing global expectation for companies to be socially responsible, the important role of international organizations like the UN and OECD in shaping guidelines.
hmm And that distinction between, genuine ethical motives and the more strategic, profit-driven approaches.
Including the dangers of greenwashing, that deceptive marketing.
Absolutely. Environmental responsibility definitely came through as a critical piece, with concrete actions companies can take and real benefits they can get.
And we shouldn't forget the challenges, right? Implementing this stuff isn't always easy. Awareness, resources, measuring impact.
True, those are real hurdles. But that Croatian survey data really drove home the point
Yeah.
that people prefer to work for and buy from socially responsible companies. It shows the tangible business implications. All of which leads us to, I guess, a final thought for you, the listener, to consider.
Okay.
Corporations are often described as, well, maybe the most influential institutions on the planet today.
Hard to argue with that sometimes.
Given the growing and diverse pressures coming from everywhere, customers, investors, current employees, even potential employees, how will the definition and the actual implementation of corporate social responsibility continue to evolve in the coming years?
Where is it heading?
Exactly. And ultimately, what will that balance look like? The balance between profit-driven motives and genuine ethical obligations for businesses operating in this increasingly interconnected, globalized, and frankly, environmentally conscious world.
Yeah, that's a big question. What is that balance going to be?
It's something with profound implications, really, for the future of business and for society as a whole. Something to mull over.